Welcome to the first in a series of sessions designed for teachers by teachers with a target audience focus of reading F to 2. This presentation looks at working in the virtual space with children in the early years. The content of this session will be explored in greater depth in follow-up webinars to be held on May the 12th and May the 26th between 4 and 5 p.m. As we transition to online teaching and learning, we're becoming aware of new systems and processes, new technologies and norms, and new challenges and opportunities. The learning intention is to support teachers to consider approaches and platforms being used to facilitate virtual learning in the early years. Success criteria relate to developing participants' awareness of frameworks to support learning design, to increase understanding of how schools are developing approaches and platforms to engage and support early learners, and the participants are supported to explore the next steps for their own school context.
One of the first considerations that you'd undertake when you are thinking about moving to developing your remote classroom would be all of the factors that are at play, just like you would in your ordinary classroom, your face-to-face classroom. In terms of developing a community of inquiry, you'd be thinking about what social presence do we have in the classroom? How are we building relationships between our students and with teacher to student? How are we developing our teaching presence, which relates to the instruction, the design and facilitation of learning? And how are we building a cognitive presence within our classroom? How are we engaging the students with the teaching content and with each other? And within that, you create your educational experience. Now, this is different in a remote space to that of a classroom space, but it's really attempting to understand the interplay between all of those presences, which is a great starting point when you are thinking about creating learning environments, particularly in literacy, in the F to 2 space. When working with students in F to 2, we have some particular considerations to keep in mind. Given the age, the level of independence, the way young students learn, it's important to have the other factors considered when designing a classroom program. We need to keep the student at the centre of all of the decisions. This applies to the way we structure learning opportunities in the virtual environment and continue to work closely with home support to nurture the continued development of learners with dispositions for learning such as curiosity, cooperation, confidence, creativity, commitment, enthusiasm, persistence, imagination, and resilience. We need to consider the key characteristics of the F to 2 learner as we focus on determining how a mix of new practices and technology application can be used to create learning experiences that engage students through precise and intentional teaching. Assessment must continue in the teaching and learning space. We must find ways to connect with our young learners, to provide feedback and gather insight into what is happening for our learners so that this continues to inform our delivery of content for learning. And in addition to that, we're thinking about how we continue to scaffold for our learners, because the online space brings with it particular considerations that a face-to-face teaching space does not have. So all of these factors come into play when we are designing the learning in an online environment. With regards to frameworks to consider when this design occurs is the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework. It outlines characteristics of our F to 2 learners, and we need to consider how we can leverage the current climate to take advantage of how this can support authentic and rigorous learning in the home context. And in thinking about context, your school context is very important. The broader context of the learning is very important. And it's imperative that you keep your school context and vision in mind as you're developing your teaching and learning programs and as they relate to F to 2 students. What is your school's vision? You're not going to go to a very didactic model of teaching and learning if you have an inquiry-based process in a face-to-face environment. And what is your theory of action? How are you going about your teaching and learning in your current circumstance, in a face-to-face circumstance? And then how does this apply to your school now that you are in an online environment. And all of the factors that you consider in terms of context are that your school vision, your school approach to teaching and learning, but they're also what is your demographic situation? What is available to your parents in terms of technology? What exists within your school community more broadly to support the teaching and learning of the students? What social capital exists? So these are considerations that are vital when you're determining what teaching and learning programs and how you're going to develop those teaching and learning programs, because context is everything when you're thinking about teaching and learning. In addition to context, or as part of the context, it's important to think about what's available to your school and how you can go about the teaching and learning in that online space. Are you able to create and develop synchronous learning programs where the student and teacher are in the same space at the same time? Or is it going to be a situation that the teacher is creating teaching and learning programs online with different programs available to them that they can then present to students at differing times across the day? You consider how much you want to teach and then what is out there to support you, so that you're always keeping the learner at the centre of the decisions that you're making. There are many tools and resources available to you. What is the best for your school? How are your teachers and students going to be able to access those things, given what you know about all of the key stakeholders in your environment? In her article, Successfully Taking Offline Classes Online, Caitlin Tucker says that the keys are prioritising community and designing student-centred lessons. And therefore, the graphic on the left-hand side shows our foundation to student, as they always are, at the centre of learning decisions that are being made. We have the virtual learning environment highlighted by the orange circle, where we are sitting in a new space. It's different to what we are currently in. And sitting around the F2 students are all of the community factors that are really impacting on the teaching and learning for that child. So whilst we are scaffolding the learning for the foundation to 2 student, we are considering all of the other factors that are at play as well in order to ensure that they are having the maximum learning experience and having that child-centred approach. As it relates to school staff, it's important to think about what has gone on before within your school environment and not be attempting to take on too much new content, too many new programs, too much new technology, so that that's going to overload the school staff from a cognitive capacity perspective. What other factors are in the wider community? What are the demographics that are at play? What is where are you remotely, and what's available to it in terms of bandwidth? There's a lot of considerations within the wider community as well that you are thinking about as you're developing the programs. And one very important one, and we're finding increasingly so, is what is within the home. What home support is there for the learner? If we have parents that are professional, that have high levels of education, and for English being their first language, that is one consideration. But we certainly have homes where there may be English as an additional language. We may have certainly some situations where there is not the capabilities and capacity within the homes to really support the learner, and we also have those working parents too. So within that space, we have to consider the community considerations and think about those community factors as we start to design those programs for our F2 students. So that leads us really, all of the things that I've mentioned so far have been very much leading us to our why. Simon Sinek talks about the starting with why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you approaching things the way you are in this remote space? And so all of the things that I've discussed until now are those things that you certainly are considering. They form your central why. And that then enables you to go and think about the how and the what, which we will be exploring further with some school examples now.
Hi, my name is Taryn. I'm one of the assistant principals at Burwood East Primary School. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the amazing work that you are all doing in this space as we transition to learning from home. And thank you for this opportunity to share Burwood East Primary School's approach to working virtually with children in the early years. I feel really lucky to work at Burwood East Primary School, where we have a wonderful group of learners, and that includes our staff. And we really do live by our motto, together we learn. A little bit about our school is we are in the Inner East. We have approximately 590 students, and we have 15 classes across the junior school, so in Foundation, Year 1 and Year 2. In the planning and preparation for the transition to learning from home, Burwood East Primary School began with learning from others. We engaged in daily regional meetings with our SEAL and network school leaders, where we had time to review, clarify and share documentation that was being created by the Department of Education, including the Learning from Home page and the guidance notes. We also looked at the AITSL guidelines for what works in online distance teaching and learning. We tapped into global education, learning from other countries and educators who are well into delivering a teaching and learning program remotely. There we found there was an overwhelming theme of student wellbeing, especially the social connections, relationships being crucial in the success of learning from home. Considering our new insights, we came back to our school context. What were the needs of our learners? And this included students, staff and parents. And how did it align with our school's vision and values? Scaffolds and clear communication were needed to support our culturally diverse community, and as a community who highly values education, the need to plan for a flexible and agile teaching and learning approach which engages and challenges students was extremely important. We surveyed, using a Google form, our parent community in regards to what access they had to devices and internet before the school holidays, and this supported us in organising resources for families, but also to consider how we were going to deliver our curriculum. We used the initial planning for remote learning, a school leader's guide, which is on the screen, which was created by Richard Lambert, the principal at Antonio Park Primary School, to identify what level of technology our students had access to, and then how are we going to deliver our curriculum. We found the best approach for our group of learners was a blended learning approach for curriculum delivery. We use asynchronous learning, where students are learning through instructional videos, worked examples and instructions posted on our Google site. And this provides the flexibility for students to engage in their learning at their own pace and at their own time. We do have students accessing our Google site page from overseas, and we also know that this style of learning supports our families whose work schedule may not always align with the class suggested timetable, where learning can occur outside of school hours. In asynchronous learning, teachers can provide feedback quite timely, and this is often through the work samples that are posted on our Google Classroom or in Seesaw. We use synchronous learning, where we hold online virtual classrooms daily, and we feel that this provides an opportunity for the students to feel connected to their peers and their teachers. They're able to seek clarification on the day's learning, ask questions, reflect on their learning, and receive feedback from their teacher. Also within our synchronous learning, there are opportunities where teachers run small focus groups in a virtual classroom setting where they can run explicit teaching lessons. For our school to deliver a safe blended learning approach, we firstly needed to decide on a video conferencing platform, and once this was decided, it was important to make sure our documentation was up to date and that we had a clear communication strategy. This included completing a privacy impact assessment, developing and communicating protocols, norms and expected behaviours which were aligned to the Child Safe Standards and the VIT Code of Conduct, for students, parents and staff. And lastly, that parents provided permission for their child or children to use this platform. It was important to maintain the safety of everyone using online platforms, so therefore we planned and delivered e-safety lessons and shared the e-safety Commissioner website with families to support students in safe and positive online experiences. It was important to upskill staff in using this platform, so therefore we provided professional learning sessions, and we also assigned 2 staff members as administrators to the platform, as we wanted to ensure that we had the best provisions in place to protect the privacy and safety of all students and teachers. Staff had the opportunity prior to the holidays to practice hosting meetings, modelling lessons to each other, and providing feedback. As a school, we felt that we were quite prepared to transition to learning from home at the beginning of term 2. So what does a virtual classroom look like for a foundation year 1 or year 2 student? We have 2 whole class virtual classrooms a day, and these sessions usually run for around 30 minutes. Our morning session really focuses on student wellbeing and engagement, so we use this as a time to check in with our students. We may do a little bit of circle time, or the students are able to share something that they did from the night before or over the weekend. And it is really lovely to see the students connect with one another and their classroom teacher during that time. Also, as our learning tasks are posted the night before on our Google site, there is an opportunity for students to seek clarification and to ask questions about the day's learning. Teachers will often explain or model key learning concepts for students, which may include a read aloud, shared reading, or a vocab word knowledge task. Once this morning session has concluded, students continue to work asynchronously, where on the Google site they have access to instructional videos which have the learning intention and the success criteria, and a worked example to support them with their learning tasks. Throughout the day, the teachers will host a small virtual classroom group where students can share their learning, reflecting on the learning process, and receive feedback, and also engage in another small explicit teaching lesson, and that really is point of need based on what's coming through the reflections. Here there is opportunities for students to engage in substantive conversation, where students will talk with one another and build on each other's ideas. Abilities, we also run intervention and EAL, small group virtual conferences. Constantly, teachers are collecting evidence of learning from our virtual classroom sessions, and also too from the work that is posted on Google Classroom and Seesaw. In our afternoon virtual classroom sessions, this is really a time where students reflect on the day's learning. They can share some work examples and explain the learning process and how it reflects back on the learning intention and success criteria. And it's also an opportunity for them to receive feedback from their peers and teachers. One thing that we have put in place at Burwood East Primary School is each year level has a specialist day, and during that time the classroom teachers for that year level have the opportunity to use the evidence of learning that they've collected during the week to plan for future learning tasks and to prepare instructional videos to really support the learning needs of those students. Thank you so much for listening to our experiences and approach at Burwood East Primary School, and I look forward to listening to some questions that you may have in the webinar. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Flick and I'm from Warrallick Primary School, and I'm just going to give you an insight on how we got set up virtually with students in the early years, so foundation to year 2. We, as Terry mentioned earlier, we followed a similar line as they did to set up what we use Google Classrooms. So we met as a SIT team. We established what technology we already had and had been established within the classroom for our students. And we also looked at what would be easiest for our school and our school community. So what I want to stress most is that you need to know your context. Our context is obviously very different from Terry's context. So what we did is that we called every family, because we don't get responses back from a survey. When they go out, they just don't come back. So we called every family to find out what devices they had available to them and if they had internet. We also worked out, by knowing our context, what our students already knew how to use. So for us, 3 to 6s had used Google Classrooms. So knowing that there were siblings at home, we thought that that would work best for our Foundation to 2 students as well. We also had to think about what was easiest for our families, as we do have a few families in our community where their parents are illiterate. So it was important that it was something easy that the students were able to do by themselves. We also had to think about knowing our staff. So what did our staff already know about online learning? I can tell you it was very minimal. And we had to think about what we could do in a quick manner. So we developed professional development, which was quick and easy, a lot of videos and a lot of hands-on activities that we needed to do to make sure we were ready to video ourselves and get online as fast as possible. So for our setting, we decided to use Google Classrooms. As I had previously mentioned, the 3 to 6s were already using that. And as there's a lot of siblings, we thought that this would then work best for our Foundation to Year 2 students. Even though we thought it would be a little bit hard to navigate, we made sure there was parent tutorials, as well as allowing an easier outlay so that parents should be able to click in and out of the tabs quite simply. So we engage with our students through the news feed. We also have got assignments which they upload, and we can see their photos and video evidence of their work. So without face-to-face contact, we don't have the facility to have that within our school setting. We've decided that we are just solely online. So they can see videos of us, but we do not see them. So we've had phone calls with our students as well, and we've made sure that there's been packs that we've sent home that go hand in hand with our online learning to make it easier for the parents and make it easier for the staff. So within our Google Classroom, we use the Classroom tab at the top, which is where all their assignments come up underneath. They have got a new one every day, so that's easy for the parents to navigate which day they're on and what lesson they need to do. The grade 1-2s also use assignments, so they submit work which is typed into a document, whereas the junior school just upload videos and their photos. As you can see down the bottom in the little picture, you can see that there's the teacher's head which they're videoing, and there's a PowerPoint that runs behind it. So that's how they use their videos to make sure they support the lessons. That's their mini lessons with times in there that they need to pause and make sure that they get their work done, independent reading, independent writing, etc. And then there's just a quick little upload button on the side where they can upload their work for their teacher to give them feedback. So that's just a quick rundown of the way that we have done Google Classroom.
At Gisborne Primary School, we are using the platform Seesaw to assign and receive student work and post direct messages to students and parents. Our Foundation team find that the ability to differentiate their planning and activities through Seesaw is having the greatest impact on student learning. Students are assigned the level of planning that is at their point of need, providing the appropriate support and challenge that is needed for them after only 7 weeks of school. The ability to embed videos on Seesaw makes it easy for Foundation students to click on a link and view content, avoiding the need to access a secondary platform, which can cause confusion at times. Our Year 1 and Year 2 teams have found the activities that have been created by teachers for teachers have been an invaluable resource on Seesaw. Teachers can assign activities to specific students, and then students can add their response by taking a photo, annotating their work, and using audio to explain their thinking. All work is collated in individual journals, making it easy for teachers to track and assess students, whilst also giving valuable feedback.
Collingwood English Language School is a setting for new arrival students in Australia. We offer an intensive English language program. And so with the move to remote learning earlier this term, we were, like so many other schools, faced with some pretty complex challenges. Minimal access to devices for our students, particularly with laptops and iPads, and limited home support were among some of those issues. It was decided early on that we would print booklets and send these booklets home to students on a weekly basis. We were, however, aware of the clear limitations to this, particularly around engagement and tracking student progress. Having used Seesaw in some of our early childhood classrooms before school closure, we decided that it would be the most effective tool to remain connected with our students, whilst also allowing us, their students, to share their learning with their teachers. Most students, our data showed, had access to at least a mobile phone in their home, and Seesaw had an intuitive and simple interface that made it easy for both teachers and students to adapt to using it fairly quickly. In the workbooks that have been sent home to students, teachers have included a daily schedule. As part of this daily schedule, students are directed to log into Seesaw and watch the morning video from their teacher, and then complete the 2 activities that have been set. Most days this includes at least one task focusing on phonics or reading. Having these activities relate directly to the booklets that have been sent home allows for multiple exposures for students. This class, for example, is learning to read the names of fruit. In the booklet, there was a variety of activities throughout the week involving writing, drawing, and reading about fruit. On Seesaw, students were set tasks including following video and print instructions to make fruit salad, taking photographs of fruit in their house, and labelling images of fruit or talking about their favourite fruit. This activity, you can see, required students to match the fruit to the correct word and then record themselves reading the names of each fruit.
I can see a banana. I can see a apple. I can see a strawberry. I can see a kiwi. I can see a grape.
Teachers have been able to set tasks with simple texts for students to record their voice reading. This has allowed teachers to complete running records and has supported the continuation of students' daily reading practice and improving their fluency. This activity is an example.
Hi, Miss. Now we read this story. Pets. I see the dog. I see the fish. I see the cat.
For students still learning their letters and sounds, interactive activities have been set, such as letter hunts around the home and picture sorts, such as these activities. We are learning more about the opportunities that Seesaw provides our students in this remote setting every day and are constantly adjusting to the needs of our students. It's definitely a work in progress, but it's exciting to see our students engage in this new way of learning, and we look forward to the ways we can transition these skills back into the classroom when schools open again.
There is much to organise for a coherent approach to remote and flexible learning, and we know the necessity to be responsive to your own community of learners, to the students, staff, home support and wider community. This series of By Teachers, For Teachers videos and webinars will support you to collaborate with other teachers and share experiences and approaches to managing this work so that you can build your own narrative both within and across schools for improved student outcomes. The school presentations touched on some things that we need to consider, and these included protocols. For example, what are your protocols for remote learning? How will you engage and interact? What do your identified learning behaviours look like in remote and flexible learning? Structure. What does your new routine look like? How is your day, week, unit structured? What are the time frames? When will learning and assessment take place? Accessibility. How are lesson materials accessed? Does the material need to be adapted for individual students or cohorts? And communication. How is direction for teaching and learning provided? How and when will students be contacted to check on learning progress? And how will they contact the teacher if they have questions or require help? There are many considerations in the flexible and online learning environment. There are many options for you to consider in your context when you are focusing on what you need to enable you to teach and learn with your students as best supports your learners. The Online Tools for Learning section on the Department Learning from Home in a School Setting website provides details of tools and resources well worth considering. The Digital Learning webpage also provides information to support reading conferences so that assessment can continue to inform teaching. We will explore some of these in more depth in later sessions in the For Teachers by Teachers series as we collaborate to impact on student outcomes. So where to next? The provocation here is, how are you planning to maintain and continue effective practices which have emerged from this experience? These will relate to now and this week, the next fortnight, the term and beyond, because we know this is going to have a long-term impact on our practice. We've seen how some schools are making sense of virtual learning for F2 learners in the context of their own schools. We will support you to explore how schools are approaching the teaching and learning of F2 readers through the rest of this series. In the webinars, we will have panels of teachers who are doing this work for you to ask questions as you seek to clarify and develop your approach to suit your context. Thanks for taking the time to consider the content of this presentation. If you would like to explore the ideas covered in this recording in greater detail, please register for one of the webinars via the Continue of Learning Hub page. These webinars will be held on Tuesday the 12th and the 26th of May from 4 to 5 p.m. The contribution from your experience will help us all to weave a rich tapestry around this unique opportunity that has been provided in these times of remote and flexible learning.